Hey everyone! Thanks for tuning in for another exciting episode. Before we begin, I would like to announce that I started uploading Men of War Assault Squad 2 co-op content on the Looping Reel Gaming channel, the channel run by me and my friends Ryan and Greg. The game Men of War is what I use in this series for the battle scenes, and we will do a lot of co-op missions on the Looping Reel Gaming channel, including different mods and scenarios. So if you are interested in seeing more of that game, please head on over to the Looping Reel Gaming channel and support us. You can find the link to the channel in the description down below. I really appreciate your support, and enjoy the rest of the episode. The war with the Galactic invader had now been spurring on for almost 6 years. In that time, technology had changed, and certain nations had fallen, but the people of Earth were not ready to throw in the towel just yet. But then, something extraordinary happened. Word got out that Earthen soldiers had been spotted amongst the droids, stormtroopers, and clones. They hailed from Romania. It turned out that the mighty display from Palpatine had intimidated many a person. With both Americas lost to the invader, there were some who fell victim to desperation. In their eyes, they could no longer win the war, and rather than be eviscerated, they volunteered to join the invader in the hopes of being spared. This betrayal to a more powerful foe had been a display as old as time itself. The Romanians back in their country were ashamed and cursed the traitors who joined Palpatine's forces. They wanted to assure the world that these people were the exception and could not be seen as pure and proud Romanians. In Europe, it did raise some eyebrows in the fear that other countries would lose people to this cause as well. An idea was sprawled to create propaganda to convince the people that Palpatine would treat human volunteers terribly and eventually execute them. This would hopefully discourage anyone from doing similar actions. Palpatine's war campaign through northern Africa went swell. The jungle battles were slow, but not as treacherous and to his disadvantage as fighting in the Amazon was. Palpatine once again resorted to clones to do his fighting. The deserts were a different story. They were wide and open, giving towering units a great advantage. But though Palpatine still used the spider droids during this particular campaign, the clones did have one big advantage over the stormtroopers that was displayed over the last couple of weeks, and that was their obedience and loyalty. If an order would be given from their higher-up, or Palpatine himself, a clone would not hesitate to shoot one of their own. Stormtroopers were a different story. Some were bound to flee, break down in fear, or worse, switch sides. He taunted Hux that a clone with older weapons and gear would at least obey its master.
How capable are your soldiers, General?
I won't have you question my methods.
They're obviously skilled at committing high treason. Perhaps Leader Snoke should consider using a clone army.
My men are exceptionally trained, programmed from birth.
As this debacle unfolded in Africa, in Europe, people were worried about the ever-increasing dominance of Japan. Palpatine for the time being was moving down south, and it would still take time for him to conquer the Middle East. This gave the Europeans the message that they had still time to resolve this issue with either the Soviets or the Japanese. Because of this issue with Japan, Soviet help in Africa was minimal. They simply could not afford it, as they had to think about their own nation first. This meant that a lot of Brits and Americans died in Africa, achieving absolutely nothing. Panic was on everyone's thoughts in Europe. In every country and nation, defenses and bunkers were set up, awaiting the confrontation one day with the Galactic invaders' forces. Palpatine had more reinforcements arrive from the Americas to Africa. There was a lot of ground to cover, and the deployment took more time than expected. But then on the 16th of November of 1945, the shocking news came out that Tokyo had fallen. With Japan being so focused on the war with Russia, they simply forgot to look behind them. An invasion force, rather small compared to that of South America or Africa, had landed and had desecrated entire cities in a matter of hours. Japan had capitulated. And with that, the war against the Soviets disappeared like mist. Without a government to lead them, many of the Japanese currently in Russia surrendered. The Soviets allowed the Japanese to serve under a communist government and granted them asylum for the time being until either Japan was retaken or new ground had been claimed in their name. With Mother Russia back in Soviet hands, people were relieved, but also worried now that Palpatine had set foot in Asia. By now, more and more countries had sided together, not in a coalition, but as fellow people of Earth, swearing to fend off Palpatine and his men. But the country that broke this was Germany. Merely 3 months after the Japanese had lost their nation, barely enough time for the citizens of the Soviet Union to get used to peace within their borders once more, Germany invaded the Soviets from the west. The communist struggle with the Japanese was a sign for the German government that the Soviet Union was vulnerable. Once again, under the motto of uniting nations under one banner, they invaded the country. But the Soviets would strike back hard. Stalin had some of his best artillery and armored divisions stationed in this area, as it previously fell victim by Palpatine. Not only that, the fact that the Soviet Union had been interwoven in a war for the last years meant that their technological breakthroughs were more impressive since the state that befell on their nation demanded this. But the Germans were also a fiercer enemy than the Japanese were. Their armor and weapons were more advanced, and thus they proved quite a challenge. But the Japanese had surprised the Russians previously, something that now did not happen, even though they did not foresee former colleague Germany commit such an act. The front line was not as wide as during the Japanese assault, and the Germans had a lot more trouble getting through, even in the less defended areas. The battles that were now being fought between the nations on Earth still demanded for technological breakthroughs to continue. In the end, the generals were sure it would benefit them once they would face the Emperor once more. And as Palpatine's grasp increased ever so over Africa, towards the Middle East, a shadow fell over Europe once more, as two titans, Germany and the Soviet Union, clashed with each other.